So I say life is beautiful, man. You can't be complaining about all these other things. Just, there's just something beautiful about it.
But you've always been like this. Like in the recent years. Mm-hmm. I think you've just been in good vibes, good energy, good...
You have to create it for yourself.
Okay, I'm ready to roll. Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Relebogile Mabotja Podcast. We know we've been making you wait for a while for another one, but we had to bring somebody that is just too nice and too awesome. This man is somebody that we grew up watching. We have admired his work, but in recent times, he's actually been quite vocal on social media and become more of a, social activist of sorts. That's how I'm going to describe him. But I've got so many questions and I'm so excited he's with us today. Give it up for Sello Maake KaNcube. How are you doing? You were just telling me, you knew my late uncle, Lady Joe Mabotja.
I think one thing that will tell you how magnificent he was, even when he was a presenter, he had his own vibe. But as an actor, like I was telling you...
People didn't know he was an actor.
No. Like I said earlier, I said, now I'm a pretty face. Rebo Brad Pitt.
Yes.
But there are people who are just actors, and I think maybe I will even equate Joe, to your Al Pacino.
Wow.
Al Pacino is not a pretty face. You know what I mean? Robert De Niro is not a pretty face. Dustin Hoffman is not a pretty face. But they are amazing actors. And Joe was that.
Wow. And you're mentioning iconic thespians.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you still feel like, because you've performed Shakespeare,
yeah.
Do you feel that the new breed or generation of actors that maybe haven't gone through that school of acting are missing something?
I think there is a lot, and especially, and I'll speak here for black actors who are coming after me. There's a lot that they've never experienced, and I think the weirdest thing for me is seeing in black actors who come out of institutions, like your VETS, UCT, all these veritable institutions. And when they perform black, it's like Batsako Gibson.
Gibson Kente.
Yes.
Share for everybody, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Share for Kente. Us what Gibson Kente acting is.
Gibson Kente's acting was over-animated.
Over the top.
Bordering on melodramatic.
Yes.
But there was, I think, a psychology or a science to it. When Gibson's plays were performed in community halls, and Gibson's plays were musicals. And if you look at how opera used to operate in the olden days, the singers would be singing with the orchestra, and at that time there were no mics. So Gibson, basically, in his training, he made his actors almost operate like they are opera singers. Because imagine singing with a band without a mic. So there was a certain, psychology and science or thought, to it. So that's why Gibson did what he did. And we were, we were over-animated. Yes. If you look at, Mama's Love.
Yes.
That's where you showed. But now I think maybe where Gibson actually failed, I think he was so caught up in his style that he had created that he didn't allow himself to adjust.
And evolve.
Yeah, because he looked at his style. It was a style. Yes, Mama. What? Mama?
Every time I was
it's like Relebogile. What? Relebogile. I love you.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
I get exactly what it is.
I mean, it was like, just keep your... And with Gibson, you would never... You see, like where I'm sitting. Now you have to sit like this and have deportment. Every time when you're sitting, you're like, yeah.
And I had to learn the lesson transitioning from theatre to television. These are close-ups. You don't need to be within.
But you know, I mean, I also have a problem with this, that there is theatre acting and camera acting. Nah. I think there are only two types of acting, good and bad.
Which acting do you do?
So, when people do bad acting in the theater, they call it a theater acting. That's just bad acting. I'll give you an example why I say this. Have you ever been in and especially, like when you are at a church, go along, and there is no even PA system.
Yes.
Or it's a funeral. In fact, church, I think church is fine, especially locationing. But pele where in a church there wouldn't be even a mic. And you see Murutu Tabarera Kwale. And when he rears, he's going to be giving you a performance. And then there comes to a time when he's just like, Puteho, let's see leading. He's going to be aware of one thing. He's speaking to, people in the church. So what is important for him is for him to be heard. So people basically, what you do is you project your voice, but you don't project your performance. And then now actors if you give an actor what the maybe like Muruti, a reverend, has done, or even Lemogolo, when he gives the Tsibiso, and you give them Putego, do you know what I mean? That's just bad acting, man.
You heard from the icon himself. Bad acting.
That is just bad acting. Because here's the difference. When you are performing in the theater, it is an open space. You know what I mean? And whereas when you are performing in camera, it is here, and there's a mic here. So that is why it is contained. But in the theater, that is just that. Come see my performance. The suit. Theater on the square.
The suit theater on the square, you get
and then
to
you see what I'm talking about.
Do you think your voice is half the job done? Because you have a phenomenal voice.
Gibson,
I feel like you can get away with nonsense if you wanted to, because you have such a beautiful voice.
I don't know about that. But what I can say is that being a protege, Gibson, that is where I guess maybe I learned projection. You know what I mean? And I think there would be places. For instance, A2 Cinema. Yeah. A2 Cinema is a 1,000-seater. It is not designed to be a theater. It is a cinema. And we used to perform A2 Cinema. Now imagine performing, and a 1,000-seater, it's like performing at Monte Teatro, Monte Casino, without mics.
And I mean
and your honor basically is created as a theater. And
the acoustics are in such a way that they are absorbing your vocals because it's got a lot of velvet.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. You know what I mean? So that I guess maybe that is what I think helped, and that is what is helping my voice now.
When you and I did the Upside of Failure together on my radio show, it must have been about 2 years ago, around there. And I remember saying to you, you are just so excited in the stage of your life. 2023, you said, my PR team says I need to get more on social media. And a year later, you have delivered. You are very active on social media. But one thing that stood out for me in that interview is how you were so in love, and so many of the listeners were like, this man is in love, this man is in love, like you're so in love, you're loud about it.
Yeah.
How did you decide for yourself that you wanted to be public about it? Because you come from the era of the in-drum headlines. If where people were getting scoops and there was shwashwi. And that could be your downside, but you are still like, I want to be out there. What made you decide that for yourself?
You know, there's one thing that I think women have got amazing power.
In what sense?
In every sense. Women lead. Women give you permission to come and talk to them. They give you permission,
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that is the power that women have. And I think even with me, it had to do with the power of my woman. Yeah.
I'm glad you're saying the power of my woman, because I know there were question marks of whether you were still together or not, and you are clarifying that.
The power of my woman.
Gumnandi ekaya.
No, women, well, let me not talk too much of my woman, but when
you say she makes me happy, there's a man who also says, I also want to be happy.
You know, I think it's Chris Rock.
Yes.
Chris Rock in one of his stand-up. And basically, like, he talks about women and men in relations. Like when a woman comes with a man to the friends,
yes,
you know, and the friends will be like, oh, I want him.
Yeah. You're advertising.
Exactly. But today's men, they behave like women. They say, what? So you don't
want to say too much?
No,
yes.
I'm not.
How do you manage the mixing of business and pleasure? I think being in the industry, it's such a natural progression with couples where we see it everywhere. With the partner is either the music producer, the manager, the publicist, or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you find the balance between having a private life with this person and also having a professional life? Because if Moto is on fed up leave, do things stop? You know,
I'll answer this by saying, I have asked my wife that she should write a book. And that book is I've given it a title. It is Marriage Pty Ltd. Marriage is a contract. Relationships are contracts. You know what I mean? And even if when you are not married, you somehow get into a contract with a person that you are involved with in a relationship. And the thing about it is that how have you all grown to be able to be, to separate things? You know, me and my wife, we talk about code red and code blue. You know, and the thing about it is actually how do you recognize each other's strengths? You know, if your wife, the perfect example for me would be Shona and Connie. You see what I mean? Connie had her strength, and Shona had his strength. And for me, that's how maybe even a relationship that you negotiate yourselves on that. But also we're living in a time where there is just so much pretense. You know what I mean? And sometimes people are so, I guess, involved in acting up. They even act up in their own lives. You know what I mean? And I think there's got to be a time where you can make a distinction between you as the person, the actor, and you as the person. You know, I mean, for me, for instance, I mean, I always say people who, actors who, when I get into character, I think that's the biggest BS ever.
Tell me why you say that's the biggest BS.
No, there's no getting into character or even becoming a character. No. You are only borrowing yourself. You're borrowing yourself to the words on the page. You're giving those words on the page your being, your experience in life, and you endow them with that. And on the script is a series of actions that a playwright or a screenwriter has put. So what you do is you just follow those series of action that this character does this, does this, does this, does this, and that's it. So basically all you're doing is you're focusing intently on those things that you are doing. It's like walking on a tightrope. But when you get at the end, it's done. Yes.
But if I go back to what you just said now about the part within the relationship and the marriage and what you were saying about current dating of pretenses, I think the reason a lot of people pretend and put up pretenses is because how do you present a version or a truth of yourself you have not faced?
Yeah.
I think there are many people who don't know themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm sitting here saying, oh, I know myself. But they're not even intentionally aware that they don't know themselves, and they're not even intentionally on a path of trying to get to know themselves.
Yeah.
So I genuinely think that there's a lot of crowd following of things where people don't actually challenge themselves on why they believe certain things. They don't challenge themselves on what they honestly feel about things, and they can't put forward something because they don't know who they are. And how can you have confidence if you're unsure of who you are, or you're waiting for the world to tell you who you are?
Yeah.
So what is your observation? Because it is a part of growing up.
I'll tell you what. I mean, what is this year? 2024. And I regard 2024 as the 40th anniversary on my journey and path to be the man that I am today.
40th.
Yeah.
So it started when you were 23.
24.
24.
Yeah, I'm 64 now. I'm Sasa material. Sasa material.
You're taking grants from people who really need them.
Hey, even there's somebody who's... Hey, let me talk.
Is someone using your SASA number? Oh my God.
No, not even my SASA number. My ID number.
To get grants?
Yeah, boy.
I'm coming back to that. Okay, you
no,
were saying.
I don't know, but anyway, so this is my 40th anniversary in my... At 24, I discovered that I have a propensity to beat up my girlfriend.
What?
Yes. And I think let's not go, sometimes people go, pretty and whatever on this thing. One thing that moved me was listening to Clement's show one time. He was interviewing the senior citizens.
So this is Clement Manyatela.
Clement Manyatela.
On 702.
On 702. And Clement, in that interview, there was this other old lady. And I think she was 80-something. And she spoke about how she lived through gender-based violence. You know what I mean? And I think that's one thing that we are scared to face. That gender-based violence has been prevalent, I think maybe even as far back as the early 19th century, if not beyond.
I would say from the beginning of time.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And I think, Rona, we are actually, I somehow look at our, older men in society. And here I will speak of who are the older men now. Bo Msholozi, Bo Tabombeki. And I'm talking about people who are in the, the public domain. If these men would stand up and say, we know this thing, and begin to say, Matot, let's sit down and really address this thing. They've never been so vocal as to be honest about it. You know what I mean? They buy khalema, but they're not honest about it. You know what I mean? And if in my 20s, I grew up, even before my 20s, as a young boy, I would be sent to go and buy boroto, and when we were buying bread at our time, they were never put in plastics. They would, tear. Sometimes it would be a newspaper, but somehow they actually changed, and it would be like a plain white paper, a little piece, and they will put it on top of the loaf, and you hold the loaf there. And the loaf bread of that time, the crust,
Because it was so
the crust was hard. Today's crust is soft. It stays soft.
Yes.
Nearly hard the crust that thing. Oh yeah, because it was crunchy. Now I'd be a young boy having been sent to go buy bread, and as I'm coming across a corner, there will be like teenage boy and girl standing with the corner kemujolo. And as you are passing, you would hear mpamer. You grow up. It's something that is prevalent in your environment. Kochai, it's also even happening. And it's not only happening in my family, it's happening in many families. So one thing that we are not doing is we are not addressing gender-based violence in how it happens. We lump it up. When somebody goes and rapes and kills, it's gender-based violence. But we've got to separate it. There is gender-based violence that happens. What is it? IPV? Interpartner violence.
Yes, interpersonal partner violence.
Yes.
Or domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Yeah. There is a difference how those things happen, and we are not addressing those. And at the end of the day, we want to address men to be mindful of it. But as if men, I don't know of a man who would be sitting with his girlfriend and say, baby, you make me so happy. I want to kick you. It doesn't happen like that.
So, is this the first time you're sharing about that time in your 20s when you were physically abusive?
No, it's not.
Now, the reason I'm asking that, we know one of the more famous actors who was very vocal, the late Patrick Shine.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're saying our leaders are not being honest. My theory is, if they have to be honest, if you look at our cabinet, statistically, some of them are abusers or have been abusers. And we're speaking specifically physical abuse. So if you have to bring it home, it means people have to have real conversations about themselves, which goes back to, if you have to own up to who you are, it can't just be the successes.
Exactly.
It has to also be that. So I'm going to ask you this then as a man, because now you're being vocal about it. What was going through your mind when those moments were happening? Was it like, I'm angry, I need to discipline her? Was it, why is she not, like, I want to get into the mind of Sello, the 20-something-year-old.
I just love the way you're asking me.
No, because I genuinely want to understand what happens in your mind. And I've interviewed somebody who used to abuse his wife. And for him, he was telling me about how his friends would say, you can't let her walk all over you. And there were, situations, other dynamics into play around her making her own money and all of those things. So he said to me, every time Namo Shapa was to discipline her and to put her in her place, right? But I don't want to just take one man's experience and apply it to everybody. So I don't know. And I don't know if it was fear, like I just want to get into the mind of the 20-year-old guy.
One thing about life is that everybody has a reason. That's what makes life interesting. Everybody has a reason for doing what they do. And the reason will never be a blanket reason. You know what I mean? So,
and I'm not using this question to justify anything, but more to say, if we are going to try solve these problems, this is having a real conversation. This is the part of Nokhuetsa.
Here's one thing that happened, because it happened and I would do it. But when I'm alone, then there's that little voice that says, Maran, into wrong. I guess that's what you do. How many times people do things and have a justification for it. And when they hear that little voice that says, Mari wrong, I'm glad that that voice, I think, became more sonorous. And it kept on and it kept on and led me to the point where I would say to her, I said, you know what? I don't understand this. That one moment I say I love you, and then one moment I hate you. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, that causes you to do what? To introspect.
Not for everybody.
Not for everybody, exactly.
Some people use that to deflect.
Even more.
Yeah.
Even
to
more.
now say, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And now I think that's where I said, nah, nobody makes me do something that I don't want. So even if I'm doing it, it's not that, it's that person who's making me do it. I am doing it, but why? And then I discovered I'm insecure. I'm jealous. And another thing is, I used to have, it's still there, a starter,
Really?
Yes. Sometimes when I hit my dramatic pauses in my acting,
you can feel.
Starter. So I guess a rider.
Yeah.
A dramatic pause.
I never knew.
Yep.
And the stuttering thing can cause a massive problem. So for anybody who doesn't know, other than the confidence issues, sometimes when a person is in a moment of being very angry or whatever, they struggle to express themselves.
Yeah.
So for now,
then it will be... And then that's when I would lash out.
Wow.
So after I reflected, then I saw those things. I saw my insecurity, my jealousy, and how the starter, because most of the time it was the starter.
Sure.
Because when I would, what was beautiful, she used to live on a taxi route. So I can check and and then remela on the side,
Yes.
Then I can taxi. When we would get into a conflict at that time, I would just step away from her, look around, wait for a taxi, point a taxi, get into the taxi and leave. And the following day I will come and say, this is what I wanted to say. That I wanted to say this, I wanted to say.
When you now gathered yourself.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So now, through that, then I learned. That was 1984, man.
Sure.
It was not even fashionable to even discuss gender or domestic violence, as it probably was called then. It was not fashionable. And I confronted that. I did what I later found to be, that was time out. I took time out of an argument and left.
So she never got you arrested? She never went to the police?
No, Relebogile guy.
No, and I know for the situation because if you did go to the police, they're gonna say these are problems.
So you can't ask me that kind of question. But what I will say also, we also have grown up at a time when ibile sometimes some girls would say,
my grandmother. My grandmother's sister would say to my grandmother, Nare, because munna hai nasa mushab, and she would say, Wena o like hor, waha wa rata, and you know wa rata because wa shapa. So the mentality has been around.
Exactly, has been around. And see, like those are things, like when we talk about these things, we don't address them. And we don't address also the aspect of when there is an argument between partners. What is it that they say to each other? And how do they even learn how to filter certain things? At this present moment, it doesn't mean I don't meet or I've never met with girls who will say horrible things to me, But this is what I actually learned out of, my whole journey. That if I can filter the BS, my own BS, and then after filtering it, throw it away and kesale le muro, something that nourishes me. What more that when you come and you throw garbage at me, that I don't sift it. and leave you with your garbage.
I'm impressed, though, that you caught yourself and that you are the one who, without some campaign, without any talking community, who said, okay, next time kifila so, because I don't want to do this anymore. I realize it's wrong and I recognize where it comes from. That you put into action, okay, let me get some and come back when I've cooled down. What would you attribute that to, that some other men don't have those light bulb moments, but when you had it?
I don't know, you have to allow yourself. Like people, sometimes we do have solitary moments that we don't want to hear. If God exists, if really God exists, He lives in your conscience.
That is so powerful.
If God exists, lives in your conscience. Because, and that God, actually, I think you experience them even when you are a child. Ultra condensed. And that God operates again, you know you're doing something wrong. Your first case, and I could imagine, like, after with some,
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And also, here's another thing as well. The very first clap that you do as a man, I don't know. And I've spoken with men and barking about that. After doing it,
because you didn't expect that
you would do it. And at that time now, you even waiting to see how and how react ajwang. And as I react in a way to react now, it's controller blind. Then you reinforce it for yourself. That's how life is. And that's how I think the human condition is. You know what I mean? I mean, first time, Lou and I, maybe other thing, maybe let's say, doing radio for the first time. You nervous. But you go and nothing happens.
And then you keep going.
And it's okay.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, all right, I can do this. I can do this. We don't look at human behavior as how it actually manifests itself in little things. You know what I mean? And I would imagine even, for instance, Lee Manyana, when the very first time they say something horrible to a man or to their boyfriends, sometimes how is he going to react? I can do it again. And they do it again.
But I think also rage, if we use the two examples, even if we remove gender, because there's a Netflix documentary, I think it's on Netflix, about a man who has been physically abused by his wife. And he had to set up cameras for people to see how serious it is. And you also get men who say disgusting things. But there's a level of rage, because when you, from what you're saying, you still sound like you were conscious in that moment. There is a rage that happens where people don't even remember what they did or said. Do you think, and I feel like just drive in Joburg and you'll know people have anger issues. Do you think a lot of people have a lot of anger issues? You see it with road rage where, and I mean blind rage where it was not that deep that you got cut off, but
I'll tell you, life is beautiful in its ugliness. After having gone on this journey, I lapsed at some point. I will not mention years, but I lapsed. And in my relapse, in that short space of time when I was in this relationship, there was so much rage that built up in me. I was hurting like nobody's business. And this person was hurting me. Kangwan. Because women have this thing, ho batla tsamaya. But ho tsamaya ho itsuruka subtholo mona ngwana. And that was a sore point to me. One time I even went on my knees, literally. She was standing, I went down on my knees. I said, please, let's not go there. But no, it's okay, no. And one day, you know what? This is not working. It's a no. First I said, I don't know how many times I've told you that this thing is painful. Now I'll make you feel it. On that one, I really, maybe we could have spoken something if ever there wasn't an intervention of some sort where somebody and Tswara saw.
Oh. So you were that angry. She could have died, basically.
Exactly. And that time, Linda, I was blind. It was blind rage. Oh. So I think that is why I say, when we talk about these things, let us not talk as if what's in Gardiya just out of the vacuum and there is no contributory thing or nothing contributes to the situation. And let us begin to talk properly. If I'm going to advise my sons to say, look at this thing this way, and mothers and other fathers don't talk to their daughters to say, hey, here are the things that you have a propensity to doing as a woman. So we will fix the men, but the women will stay as they are. Now, in my journey with that as well, I ended up doing a play. I dealt with toxic masculinity in 2009. I didn't even know that it was toxic masculinity. There were 4 guys who wanted to do a play, and they said, hey, Sello, now we want to do a play to show that we have changed. As Banna. And my question was, changed from what? And that conversation led to us writing a play called Koming. And as you know, Koming, rite of passage. Initiation, exactly. Now, I use that as the metaphor for going through the psychological initiation. When you go there, it's all about enduring physical pain. And more in that play, it was men dealing with their psychological pain, where one of the characters says, now I have realized that I am a human being first and a man after. Because throughout the play, as he started, as a man, as a man, as a man, it was like, as a man. What I love is how women go about it these days. As a woman, as a woman, you're a human being first before you are a woman. And basically, it's falling into the same trap that men were going through, not recognizing their humanity. And for me, I think what I did in this whole journey was discover my own humanity. And just say, this is me. And this is how I will relate to my environment. Because there wasn't even a way you are being taught how to be a man.
Let me ask you then this, because this concept of being taught to be a man within the context of you're a human being first, what would you say being a man is? Because the narrative for centuries is man as a provider, protector, leader, head of the household. Having gone through the things you've gone through, seeing how times have changed, looking at your marriage and the dynamics, I'm sure your views have changed over the years.
They've changed. There are a lot of things that made them to change. As a young boy growing, I was the first child. And graduate o toloro o koropa o tlina lintlo. At 11 ke apea bogobe. Ka graduate ka etsa gravy. Ka graduate ka ne ke bakale di biscuit At 13, you know what I mean? So you see already men, or how a boy child is raised, has started changing from long ago. And I know even some of my friends were living in that kind of situation where and go, you know what I mean? We all had you know what I mean? We grew up being domesticated. But somehow, I remember my younger sister, Kimsiaga 7 years, but then I get a matric in 13. Then, you know, the tasks and then they were shifted to her. And here's also another thing. Manapkin, the black label. Black label ma. Napkin. Who taught me? My mother. You know what I mean? And also, I actually feel more, I'd rather do domestic things than a garden. I hate garden. But
you look terrible at it. You look like you would kill some plants.
I guess so. You know, but yeah, and so I'm more domesticated. So the changing of how men should be changed from long ago. And it is just that we don't want to, you know, men have got to understand that, yeah, you might find yourself in a situation where your woman is the one who's working and you are not. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean... Exactly. And kweno sitting lingwana. You know what I mean? That doesn't take your manhood away. It doesn't. But I mean, my siblings, in fact, when they were a year old, mama na ka. So that is why I could jingle barke kono tlhatso manapkin. And mama na yo walbona lakan barke napkin akayuak. It's a hab. You know what I mean? So being a man has changed from what it was maybe in the 300 centuries ago. And we can't hold on to that. We got to realize when being a man also just recognize your humanity first. You know, and as you recognize your humanity first, you recognize the humanity in your child, you recognize the humanity in your partner.
So knowing what you're saying and seeing the gender wars, what do you bring to the table? What are your thoughts of that? Because we see you as, you know, a respectable elder who can advise. When you see these conversations, what do you bring to the table? In Dota must, all of those conversations.
I think also, you know, like, and sometimes, you know, now I've always said, if you say a woman is independent and is more powerful and whatever, now I'd say bring her here. Because I would never be threatened by what you have, by who you are. You know what I mean? And I think what people tend to do, and it says something about the person. If ever you're going to take your job to make you, who are you without your job? You know what I mean? So other people basically, and not that for me, that's why I think I love acting. Because I can be anything. But I know I'm not it.
Yeah.
And then come back and Sello.
Always Sello.
And be Sello.
What do they call you at home? Like, what was your nickname growing up?
I know, Mansi, but you know what? It is terrible in this sense here now.
Why?
To say. Because now I'm opening my life. Don't worry, it's just
you and I. No one's listening.
I've had that experience.
Where people are calling you by your niling
You know, but my mother had. I'll recall the mother side. You know, my mother had, when my mother never told me that she loves me.
Really?
No.
But you know, there's a generation of black mothers. The way she told you she loves you is by saying Kaukocha.
Nah. My mother, when he would call me and say, Nzilo, I know. I know, Mama. I know. I know.
Khori, you are loved.
I know I'm loved. Even my stepfather. And that's another man. Maake, that man was just something else. Mupediolo.
For those of you watching, I silly pedi.
Mupedi.
Mupedi.
Mupediola man. I can comfortably say I'm what I am because of him. And again, it shows you it doesn't take your blood child to raise them to be something. And I remember him telling me as a maybe 9-year-old, 10-year-old, and he had a few. He had had a few. And, he took it out from my mother, like, Zilo, come here. Sit here. Sit here. Are bona ngwanaka. Batho ba na le gore ngwana ge se wa gago a ka se be selo. But I want to prove them wrong.
What happened to Papa?
He passed on.
But you got a dad who stepped up.
Oh, no, not, you remember biological?
Yes,
No, he was still alive. I mean, I actually got to interact with him. Actually, even he was also a contributory factor to my changing. Because at one day, because I was staying with him when this whole thing, propensity to being violent, I was staying with him. And one day, he said, he was reprimanding me for something. And I realized that he didn't ask me how I feel about it. And that almost echoed what I was doing to my girlfriend.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. So this maybe temperament, this is where it's coming from. And I asked myself, like, if I'm feeling so bad that he doesn't even ask me, or how do I feel about this? How does my girlfriend feel, Ian? That's also what contributed to my change.
Yo.
It has been a very interesting, that's why I say life is beautiful in its ugliness. It really is beautiful. And if you allow yourself, I think to just allow yourself to be reflective and see the journey that you, and look, Bariking, almost function with, I think we all have a duality. I know I exercise that as an actor. I mean, for instance, even Bariking ujola, and but lo cheka and waitiko khaba do mailing. It's like the other part. It's like you're functioning there. You know what I mean? So, and I think you got to allow yourself. Shakespeare says all the world is a stage, and every man and woman merely players making their entrances and exits. So if we are merely players, we are merely actors. And as an actor, I work with this duality. When I'm playing this part, I'm busy looking at myself, how I'm executing it. You got to look at what is it that you are executing. Character is defined by actions. So what actions are you choosing to do to be the character that you want? I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
No, completely, because talking is easy, doing is something else. And the people around you are their actions. They show you what you mean to them more than they tell you.
And that's also love. Love is carrying in action. If somebody loves something, you see how they care for it.
Love is a verb more than it is a noun. It's a doing word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it is caring in action. That when somebody cares, you see it in the actions that they do to show that they care.
You are in your 60s now.
64.
Which my father says is such a great place to be in life.
Is it that?
Yes. You'll be on 7th floor at some point and then another world is opened up. But I have to ask, how did you, if you have, find a way to forgive yourself for some of the things you did in the past and make peace with it, that you can even speak openly about it? Because there is a certain shame that comes with it, which many men, I'm sure, hide behind, and women who are abusive.
I think, the thing is do you have, when you go and lay your head on your pillow, do you sleep well? And I love my sleep.
Peacefully. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's because I owned up to myself, and I said, "Ooh," and I don't think also acting helps. I don't know if it contributed to that, because when you are acting, you do a wrong thing and then you want to correct it. You know what I mean? So you are always in that, and I think maybe that also, Leona, maybe contributed, to this whole journey. To accept who I am and what I am. And I think to know, Virginia, man. That's my mother's name. And I dated one lady, and she was horrible to me. Horrible. And I remember one day saying to her, I said, "You know what? You treat me as if I was never someone else's child. I was once someone else's baby. And I was held with so much love. And when you look at how a baby is held, a baby you know what I mean? I may not remember all those rocking and those kisses consciously, but some way, somehow, I know that tenderness, and this is not a tenderness that you are giving me. And I walked.
There was a day, and I remember it inspired a conversation on my radio show. So you were tweeting quite a bit about paternity, compulsory paternity testing and all of those things. What was happening in your life that you were so vocal about something that is still an issue today? And
it is still an issue, even, Linda, because I think there are some tests that I have to make.
Really?
Yeah.
So recap for us. Father of two?
No, I'm a father of 6. One passed on.
Yes. This
so
was
I'm left
the one
with 5.
Who passed on in 2011.
2011, yes.
May his soul rest in peace.
Yeah. So yeah, and one thing that I always say, when somebody asks me how many children do you have, and I would say 6 that I know of. As a man, you never know if the child is yours. You are told. And I think if ever there's going to be any justice and fairness, at first it was maybe a whole thing. There's DNA. And if ever we are truthful, we shouldn't even be saying no. Does it mean now it's happy? No. Hey,
why feel?
Maui, there are people who have raised children by thinking and they were never their children. And they loved them. Unless even maybe somehow maybe your mother tells you as a boy, as a man, but sometimes you know, but this is one thing that I discovered with my mother. My mother had problems also with my children.
In what sense?
She never really was attached to them like she was attached to my sister's child. And one lady, one mother actually explained it to me. Ore, your mother knows that that child is your sister's child. But we are not too sure. You know, like now, it's like you don't even can afford to be jealous because of DNA and to be insecure about anything. Science has come to actually even make life a little easier. And one has got to understand that. And even and the thing is also, people own up other people's BS. If I'm doing the suit now,
yes,
which deals with infidelity. If you go and be unfaithful or cheat, why should I make it my problem? Not my problem.
It's none of your business.
Oh, yeah.
So wait.
And then why don't you call one say
Let's tell me the ages of the 6 children, including the late one, in order of when they were born. So number 1, firstborn.
82, 83, 86, 97, 99, 2000.
Okay.
No, 2002.
So 6 children, one has passed on.
That I know of. That I know of.
Did you have confirmation? Do you have doubts? I mean, he was 28 when he died.
Look, I mean, little doubts because it's of the time. That the time, the environment makes you to think certain things. Do you know what I mean? And somehow, and you begin to also question, hey man, you made me go so much hell with this child. Is he really mine? How can you not allow a child that is supposed to be mine and you keep them away from me?
Oh, yo?
You know, why? Those are things that I'm saying.
And what was your relationship like with your son that passed on?
Relationship with my children, except the last one, Karo, you know, he came when he was 6, so, you know, even my second child featured into my life when he was already 20. We have one of the most acrimonious relationships, you know.
How come?
Because I think she can't deal with the fact that Hakambukhudis, you know. And there was one time we'd been to in each other's lives for like, I said 14 years. And I remember I called him and I said, you know, son, I've spent 14 years to try and make us work. And I can't now. And I broke down. I said, I can't now. And my son said, no, it's not even 14. It's 15. You know. So, I mean, you can see, you know. But yeah, it's even now, it is the most difficult relationship.
I can understand why being a girl, having grown up with a dad in the home, but we didn't have a connection. And that was very tough for me being a creative child, where you don't even need to be creative, but there's a certain sense of validation I felt I needed. So this concept of, let's call it daddy issues, where our mukhudisa, for whatever reason, now the relationship is difficult because Rona will always think about the years we lost out on not having Papa. And on top of that, you think, Hore, maybe if Papa was present and there, I may not have made some shitty choices in my relationships. So, and I'm not saying that's what's going on with your daughter. I'm just sharing a perspective as a girl child. Hore, much as when we speak about boy children, we say there must be a father in the home. The impact of a daughter not having a father in the home that is present, that there's a healthy relationship with the mom for her to see what that looks like. It is so deep that we are still, as women, all dealing with different levels of daddy issues. Which might not even look the same, because people think, well, how therefore. But there's so many layers to it. So in terms of that relationship, as in Tate, what would you say, and this might come out as a very difficult question because there are many dynamics in the context of co-parenting. There are many women who use children and I think our court systems are fully underutilized to solve the issues, conversation aside. What would you say you take responsibility for as Ntate in the relationships with your children?
You know, I said to him, actually, this son of mine, when he was when he had just pregnated a girl, and I said to him, you know, one thing that I realized is that out of my own life experience is that marriage is not the going to sign. That marriage is when the sperm meets the egg. And we never realized that no man can put asunder. Only death will. And that also came out of my realization with my first child. When he passed on, me and her mother and his mother got nothing. The mothers of my other children, they like it or not, I'm in their lives. They are in my life. And if we can just learn, going there to have sex, you're actually performing a godly act of creation. And I think you need to go there with all your wits about you. That's the biggest regret that I have.
Not understanding the gravity of creating life.
Yeah. And if ever we can learn that when you go there, it's a godly act, for goodness sake. Creation is being made there. Have you got your wits about you? That whatever happens, this you are accountable to. You are accountable to your action.
For the
rest of your life.
You mentioned something now.
Let me say this before. Another thing that I realized, we always say, baby mama drama. Isn't it?
When you're just calling for the money.
It's like, but one thing that I realized, painfully so, It's that when you pregnate this girl who never had a child before, who you found with a intact body at times, and you make them pregnant, a lot of transformation happens after that. And then they go and bear that child. And you like, yeah, man. Who must love her now? I think there are a lot of things that we really don't sit down and just try and make sense of them. So that even when you grow as a child, all these things you are made to just be able to understand the gravity that they have.
You made me realize something. Your child that died, you mentioned to say, after this child is buried, you and the mother now have nothing, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing binding you. Mm-mm. And it just got me thinking, like, overnight, you have zero reason to have a conversation.
I don't.
How was it in that time grieving? Because much as there can be 2,000 people at the funeral, it's only you and her that know what you're going through.
You know, I think I would like to thank her parents, her mother. And she was married at the time. But her mother insisted that me and her have got to sit together. And I think that in itself, for us, it became a shared grief just by just being, you know, together, sitting together throughout the whole funeral thing, you know. And, we, after every birthday, you know, after his passing, we would call each other, or even on the day that he was, you know, anniversaries, but it somehow, you know, just died out as time went on. And I think there's something that her mother understood, because she insisted, no, mabahlali bonke. And and those are certain things, you know, that older people know, and there's a certain knowledge that we're not even passing it on, you know. And I think you actually even discover the spirituality that we have and have had as a people.
So when last did you and her speak? Because your son then would have been gone 13 years.
He would have been 40. 40 in 82, December. You know.
And it's been a few years.
It's been a few years.
Yeah. That is so deep.
That's life. That's life. Life is just something else. You know, and also, you know, for me, it's like, and now I'm just going back into acting, because I think acting is a metaphor of life. And if actors could be trained like musicians, for instance, pianist. A pianist knows that instrument and can play it even in the dark. He knows which note where, you know, it's like there. And as actors, what is it that we have as our instrument? We have the body, the mind, whatever, the soul, whatever. And if we could learn and train ourselves that, like a musician, when you ask them to play a note, they don't have to go, I have to go into character. No, they give you the note. And I think it is possible that an actor can learn that, as long as the process has been followed. Because if ever people can be trained, for instance, like working CIA, and they learn
how to read
block
people,
how to block, and you will put him on a polygraph, and they beat the polygraph because they know how to control their breathing, that what they hear is not resonating in the body. You know, the body remembers, by the way.
It does.
You know? And as actors, we live on remembering the sensations of all the emotions that are needed for a character. You know?
Because you've had them in you.
Exactly. But
be it
also,
anger, be it sadness, whatever, yeah.
But we just have to learn to harness them to perfection. I wish as a young actor I was taken to what I'm thinking is possible. My uncle was an actor, my uncle Rangwani. My father's mother and my Rangwani's mother are sisters. So Rangwani in that sense. His name is Kenima Joes. He was one of the famous actors, Zach Gibson. He did the first Sikalo. Gibson, he played Sikalo. 15, now I'm like, I want to be an actor. You know, I go to him and I say, hey, Baba, I'm by actor. He gave first 2 lessons that he gave, I think only lessons. He broke down, he gave me the definition of drama, as far as he was concerned at that time. And he said, drama is the human condition in action and dialogue on stage. And then what he did again, he broke down the word actor. He said A stands for action, C stands for creativity, T stands for technique, O stands for observation, R stands for reaction. All these 5 things you use as an actor. Much later in my career, then I've asked myself, but how does creativity work? How does technique come into being? How does observation work? These 2 are self-explanatory, action and reaction. And I realized that the first thing that an actor has got to learn is observation. You observe life around you. It's what I call external observation and internal observation. Observe life inside you. An ordinary...
Sorry, that was so deep. Observe life inside you. And the reason I think that is so powerful and for all of us is because that's part of the process of getting to know yourself. So you know what are the things that tick you off, what are the things that bring you joy, what are the things that whatever. But we've numbed ourselves so much to the point that you can't observe, you can't see, you can't recognize, you can't take note. Life has become so busy, you haven't even had a chance to just breathe what's going on inside of you. Observe, okay, the inside. I'm going to remember that.
And with internal observation now, ordinary people, when they get angry, they just get angry. That's nonsense. That's it. But for an actor, when you get angry, it's like, oh, so this is how I am when I'm angry. And it's like almost, you got to kind of like relish that emotion like you relish orgasm.
It's not the same for men and women. Let me just say, not the same for men and women.
Yeah, I know, but that's it. Basically, because you should almost like let it sink.
You're not allowed to talk about orgasms. You're in your 60s. You look up to you. And in our minds, people over 60 don't have sex.
My problem is I'm married young.
Please, I have to ask a question, and I don't know if I've asked this of you before. Do you prefer younger women?
No.
And if so, why is that the case?
I prefer independent women.
So, our age group, are independent?
There's You know, like young people today, they're beautiful. Abana the hang-ups are the past. You know, and they are now. Bamu. You know what I mean? And if ever, I had met maybe a person, we are bargaining. There's a term that I want to use. We are the sum total of our own biographies. And sometimes we can't even separate ourselves from them. And, one thing that I would say even, when I would be starting to date a lady or a girl, and I would say to them, here's one thing that you must not do. Don't take me as your regular black man. You're going to have a problem.
What's a regular black man?
Your regular black man, it is the one oilong hore. You know how to hit the button still hore. You know how he will react. I'm not that. Because I've really thought through. Like one of my exes once said, I said, you know what? You are one black man who has thought his shit out. She would say that when she's happy. When she's not getting what she wants, she would say, the problem about you is that you are just too smart for your own good.
So you're referring to Amusadi Autobeta?
Yeah.
Where she knows Hore. Okay. I hear you.
Then, I'm not a regular black man. I've thought, who I am as a person. I am not what you see. I am what I am that I've made. And I know what is it that I've made. And I've made this person to behave and be in a certain way. And he will love you in a certain way. But one that I like, me getting away from other things. Like Valentine's Day and whatever. Oh, I have a nice way of running away from that.
How? You just said you don't like other... Wait, you run away from Valentine's?
Yes.
Why?
That's a regular black man's thing.
So what do you do on Valentine's Day?
Here's what I do. This is how I get out of it. This is how I got out of it. And I said, I would say, if you listen, you date out.
Yes.
And you're expecting a Valentine. And I would say, you know what, Relebogile man. I'm a good actor. So it's a script.
As in, don't tell me what to do or say.
Exactly.
So when
because what I will do
no, that's a cop out.
I know it is. Because what I will do now, all I've got to do, I've got to hit my mark, look at you in the eye, and tell the truth, isn't it?
No.
Exactly.
I refuse.
So
wait, you don't. Is it that you don't believe in Valentine's Day, or you do things your own way?
I do things my own way. Valentine.
Give me an example.
My Valentine.
Yes.
Has to do with the day I met you. Like even with my wife, the one day that we commemorate my Valentine yakalena, it is 17th of October.
Udirang, ureka mablom.
We in Jangela. I come regular mablom as you. What's something regular mablom? I
am so scared.
What's the regular mablom?
Okay, so
I got a mablom. Baby, this is what you got on this day a year ago.
I am so dead.
No, guys. You know what?
Please call me.
There's
a counselor about this man, because yay.
There's a beautiful acting book called 6 Lessons of Acting, and in it, I think it's in the introduction of that book. The writer says, or in the introduction, he says, the rules of life are the ones you make it yourself. Yeah. I make my own rules. Me and the person who we make our own rules.
At the end of the day, that's what counts.
That's
as
what
long
counts.
As the two of you are aligned and lekao fela, I think that's what counts. I have to ask, I have this feeling, with how vocal you've been on certain issues publicly. You could I'm not saying you would, but you could entertain the idea of going into politics. Is it something you would do?
This morning, my wife says to me, we were talking, and she wasn't getting her way, actually. And she says, now I understand why you wanted to go into politics.
So you did?
Yeah.
Tell me everything. Did you get invited by a party, or you just felt like...
No, I felt like it. And it is because I'm hating what is going on.
In the industry, in the country?
In the country, Mom. When Mandela was released, I was with my biological father. He wept. He never explained why. But I think he was releasing something that has been there in him for the better part of his life. And finally it was like, I wonder what he would think now.
Of where the country is.
Yeah.
30 years into democracy. Yeah.
And, and I think there is a lot of disappointment from people because that release of Mandela, I remember it because, it was, finally, you could wear me, and not feel, one thing that young people or kids who grew not knowing the impact of past or the impact of apartheid. It's like with apartheid, you never knew when you were right. You always assumed the default of being on the wrong side.
Because you're black?
Yeah. Now imagine when you're living like that throughout your life. You live with the assumption of, I don't have any right, I'm wrong somewhere. And that's why it's yeah, boss. My mother I date. My mother get a girlfriend tell her
You brought a white girl home. What year was this? Why do I feel like she was an actress?
No.
Was she an actress?
No, she was not. But she was in the arts. 80-something, 87, 88. So, and my mother was watching. So when she comes into the living room, my mother would say, yes, Mrs.
To your girlfriend.
But all I'm just trying to say to you is, do we realize what apartheid did? That was her conditioning. And now, how, having lived our lives with that default of living with the default of being on the wrong side, how do you just shake it off?
You don't.
You don't. And again, because also one thing that we haven't done is actually tell stories that actually makes us understand how we got where we are, even psychologically. We tell horrible stories, crime, we're not telling the real stories.
It's so interesting, and I can't remember who said this, but someone said to me recently that people forget that during apartheid, people were having sex, people were telling jokes, people were laughing. We're still at the part where the storytelling is still around the apartheid because we still have not fully grappled with the impact of it. We're yet to get to the point where you can have a South African film series about apartheid, but it's not about the segregation. It's about the fact that you're trying to have sex next to paraffin stove or whatever. And I thought, that is so deep. I never thought of it that way, because when we look back, we're just remembering the suffering, but we're not remembering the fact that people had full lives. They were making babies. They were. I am so dead. Okay, before we wrap up, I have to ask Jorge, are you still considering politics? Would you go in? Like, would you do what Afana Mokoena did, where the acting went aside for the greater good of your country?
I would, but I somehow also feel, not that I feel old, I actually don't feel old at all.
You're the perfect age for politics. You know that, right?
I know, but I get you guys, you always tell, these old people. You know what I mean? But I would, Fana. I think there's something has got to give. But the thing is, when you get into it, you're going to have to kind of clean up so much. And the thing is, now our leadership disappointed me. But I always describe what is happening. When we were growing up, there was a thing when people would go Relebogile Mabotja, and that was going to look for work. And the person would go, maybe to where there are factories, and at the gate there would be a security guard, Machingelani in those days, and they would ask Machingelani, "Hey, ba hira mo?" And Machingelani would say, "Yes, ba hira." And the person would say, "Maraboroto boteng." And I think that is something so deep in our psyche, that we always knew where we're working from. By Bisang, time.
The data bundles are depleted. The English bundles.
Exactly.
Tell me, guys, again.
We work from a position here.
Yes.
And when we're working from there, and it has gone through generations for the longest of time, and also with the dispossession of land. And when you look at the dispossession, 1913 was horrible. Because people who at one point they were owning land then became laborers on the land. You know what I mean? And
working for maize meal.
Exactly. But it didn't only start then. It started with the Eastern Frontier. What happened to Amaxhosa? That was devastation.
So if you feel so passionately about these things, what is stopping you from taking the charge and going into politics? Because it's something you were thinking about anyways.
But also, you see, more you're going to have to clean up, because now you're going to have to clean up what nonsense and kid leaders. Look at Maburu. 1918, they formed the Afrikaner Broederbond. 30 years later, the Broederbond has grown itself to even go into political power. And when they get into political power, they have all the forces of how they want to build this land. And they go 48, 58, 10, 58, 68, 20. They fall short of hitting the third decade. What comes in the way? June 16. And had June 16 never happened, their mission was complete. Their mission was complete. It was going to be an Afrikaner-speaking country. And I tell you, 76, I was doing standard 10, or grade 10 now. It was standard 8 then. Textbooks, South Africans, were delivered in January. Wiskunde, they were delivered. We failed to deliver textbooks. We failed to deliver, and they delivered to the majority. We can't say they delivered only for themselves. They delivered to the majority.
So let me ask, if you were to join, would you join as an independent or with a party?
As an independent. And I think that's where I think even my campaigning would be even more difficult.
There are independents that have positions, you never know.
But, but also, like the other thing that I would, look into. I think being a president, it's like being a director of a play.
I love how everything for you is the acting world.
I tell you, it is.
But you know why? Can I tell you why I agree with you?
Yeah.
You are the director, ne? But not of a play, of a big studio Hollywood blockbuster. You're still the of the producer in the studios.
I know.
So you're not the final answer. That's why there are films that have director's cut. The one that the director actually wanted.
I know, yeah.
So being a president, you are answerable to people.
Hey man, you are the working, you are Harvey, even though Harvey Weinstein. But no, in a positive side of things, yes, you are. The ultimate director, and your casting,
your cabinet
has got exactly people who have got to play the script that you shall have written, and they should play those parts to perfection.
In closing, how would you like to be remembered? Because there's many who still hold on to Achimoroka. There's many who hold on to other things. I don't think we even need to get to a point of, do you feel like you've received your flowers? How would you like to be remembered?
I didn't come for flowers. I came to live and die. This journey is from the womb to the tomb. So
I've never heard that before. The womb to the tomb. I'm gonna say you get your flowers at your gravesite.
I don't care about flowers. When you did, you did.
How do you want to be remembered?
I'm not in control of that.
If you could choose to say, I want my legacy to be, or I want people to remember Sello as a man who changed the game, who, I don't know, made us have conversations we weren't having.
Truly speaking, I don't have any control, but what I would say is, because, some girlfriends are going to remember, and Robert Pino.
Yes, there will be.
But he lived.
He lived. I like that. I like that a lot. Sello, I feel like we could speak for hours on end about so many things.
I know, thank you.
But thank you for coming through, for sharing, for speaking on conversations that need to be had, for being real about who you were and the things that you've done in the past. And I can only hope that more men are motivated to be real, and women who are in those positions to just be real with themselves. I think that is the start to solving problems, is identifying what they are and where they come from. But
we got to know, Barking, every moment in life is redeemable. Okay, and I know I'm taking this philosophy from the stage, that every moment on stage is redeemable. But I believe in redemption. And you can redeem yourself. Nobody has any power over you. You have power on who you want to be. People who become hobos, I appreciate the choice, and they're living with it. Because they could choose other ways. That fine boy who speaks so well, and somebody decided they want to take him off the street. What did he do?
He went back.
He went back. It's a choice. choice. In life, we have a choice. So we can choose to redeem ourselves from the bad things that we do, and be honest to yourself, not to another person. Let them benefit from your honesty.
Sure. Many gems from this episode. None of you have permission to call him by the pet name. Ne? He was just telling us, please do not do it. Kintate Sello, and we love your work.
You can call me Sello Maake KaNcube.
Sello Maake KaNcube. Thank you so much for coming through. Thank you for joining this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on the channel. Hit the notification bell so you can find out about more guests. Let us know which guests you'd like to see come through and sit with us on the Relebogile Mabotja Podcast. Thank you so much for coming through. It's out.